When I first saw the teaser trailer for The Irishman, there was one specific image that made me extremely excited. It wasn't Robert De Niro's de-aged face, which was slightly underwhelming, and it wasn't Pacino talking on the phone as Jimmy Hoffa, which was actually awesome. The image that stuck in my head was Joe Pesci sitting at a table with the Goodfellas-esque red lamp, one man whispering in his ear, another listening in on the conversation. That single shot made Pesci's character the one I was most anxious to see on screen, and I was not disappointed. Within the first few minutes of The Irishman, we learn that Pesci is playing the role of Russell Bufalino, the boss of the Bufalino crime family. Russell is the most influential person in the life of the film's main character, Frank Sheeran, and there is much to be taken from Russell's story and Scorsese's latest masterpiece. Before we start investigating Russell Bufalino, I do want to take a moment to praise the amazing performance of Joe Pesci. Pesci had not appeared in a feature film in nearly a decade before the release of The Irishman, which is a testament to his miraculous talent as an actor. I think there's grounds to say that Russell is Pesci's finest and most layered performance, and as much as I like Brad Pitt, I thought he probably should have won an Oscar for Moneyball. I don't think his performance as Cliff Booth in Once Upon a Time in Hollywood matches Pesci's work as the measured yet formidable Philadelphia mob boss. Now, there is one word that can serve as a guide to Russell Bufalino as a character, and that word is control. As I will break down later on, nearly every aspect of Russell's life is predicated on control. Control of his crime family, his actual family, his friends, his emotions. Russell values control more than anything. But eventually, he loses it, and his reaction to this loss is fascinating. But before we dig into the heart of Russell, we have to start at the surface. Russell is unlike many crime bosses you find in other films because he's actually not that bad a guy. He's not arrogant, he knows he has power, but he doesn't flaunt it like Joey Gallo does in The Irishman, for instance. The first time he meets Frank, he helps him with his engine problems, and not only that, but when he meets Frank several weeks later, he recalls the exact part he told him to replace. So he takes interest in people, even people who will probably never impact his life in a serious way. And that's actually admirable. His relationship with Frank is also unique in the sense that the mafia life would not expect Russell to treat someone like Frank as a son. Frank is Irish, he can never be a made man, he can never be an official part of Russell's family, yet Russell will do anything in his power to keep Frank safe. Even when Frank destroys a business belonging to Angelo Bruno, Russell vouches for him. Russell is not an easy man to please, as Frank tells us, but if you're loyal to Russ, he'll certainly be loyal to you.
You got a good friend here. You don't know how good a friend you got.
I know.
No, you don't know.
Russell's quick admiration of Frank is very interesting, and I think it comes from a couple of things that Frank tells him when they have their first long conversation. During that conversation, Frank tells of his story fighting in Italy, and just the way Russell looks at him. He's laser focused, he's picking up not only every word Frank says, but the way he says it. And when the conversation concludes, I think there are two things Russell really likes about Frank. Number one, he's honest to Russell. He admits he was afraid during the war and afraid of dying. And number two, he says that after he survived the war, he adopted a whatever happens, happens mentality. That mentality is extremely helpful in the violent mob world, and probably the same one Russell took on after escaping Cuba. Also, he speaks Italian. Now, getting back to the topic of control. Despite Russell's small figure, he has an aura of control that Frank notices immediately. After first meeting Russell at the gas station, Frank says that he didn't know if he owned the gas station, but you could tell he owned something. And Frank was right. Russell basically owned the entire city, and he did that by controlling even the seemingly frivolous disputes in his territory. Russell didn't work out of some mansion, he worked out of a curtain store. And he would deal with all problems that involved his interest, even the minor ones. If an employee was hurting a business's monthly profit, Russ came in to have a chat. If there was a war bubbling between two families back in New York, Russ was called in to calm the waters. As Frank tells us, all roads went back to Russell. The main reason why everybody listened to Russell was because unlike other men in the world of La Cosa Nostra, Russell was able to control his emotions. His discipline is of course contrasted by the bombastic nature of Jimmy Hoffa. In fact, Russell even complains to Frank that Jimmy is too emotional and never sees the bigger picture. Russell's emotional restraint is seen many times throughout the film. At the very beginning, Russell's wife is smoking in the car against Russell's wishes, but instead of blowing up on her right then and there, he calmly has Frank pull over so their wives can smoke. He realizes that starting a road trip with an argument is going to have ramifications for the entire trip, so he thinks things through and makes the wiser choice. Another small moment is when Peggy disrespects Russell after he gives her $100 for Christmas. She doesn't even say thank you and then walks away. Frank wants to call her back, but Russell, who is used to getting treated with absolute respect even by mob bosses, doesn't make an issue of it at all. He just says, "She said thanks for the first present? That's good enough." Even failures in the mob world are not met with rash decisions or tantrums. When the Bay of Pigs happens and Russell's ambitions come falling apart, he gives the TV screen a subtle look of anguish, genius acting by Pesci by the way, and that's it. He doesn't lash out at someone around him, he doesn't start throwing glasses like Michael Keaton in Birdman. The Bay of Pigs is a massive disappointment for him, but he doesn't do anything before completely thinking it through. Murder is an irreversible decision, and because of that, Russell isn't quick to suggest that option. In fact, every murder must be sanctioned by Russell before taking place. When Dorfman is causing him and the Mafia problems, Russell doesn't have him killed by Frank, he just sends a warning. Russell also gives Jimmy every opportunity to save himself, but Jimmy in his pride doesn't listen, and in the end, Russell couldn't save him from the New York families. When Tony Salerno tells Russell what Jimmy plans to do to the Mafia loans, you can tell Russell knows where things are going, and he hates it. Russell didn't want the "I'm a killer" reputation that other gangsters wanted because he's smart. He understands that such a reputation will bring heat, and also, as I said before, the consequences of murder can never be undone. But for as much control as Russell has, there are a couple instances where he loses it, and he's visibly confused in these situations. For starters, he can never get on the good side of children. When he tries to win the affection of Peggy, he does the conventional things he thinks will work. He tells her a cutesy joke about why heaven is so high, he offers her candy, he gives her money, but none of it ever works. Jimmy Hoffa was a parent, so he does understand children better than Russ, who was unable to have kids with his wife, but I think there's another element at play here. Russell is a thinker. Every word and action is considered deeply. He's not one to live in the moment. Jimmy, on the other hand, lives in the moment too much. But for children, the latter personality is much more appealing. So what makes Russell so successful in the mob world makes him unsuccessful when interacting with children. The end of Russell's life may be the most interesting part of his story. When he enters prison, everything that had been occupying his mind for decades is taken away. He has no more disputes to settle, no more businesses to manage. He's left to his own mind, and the thoughts that come over him are ones of guilt. He thinks about Jimmy. He thinks about Jimmy's family. Deep down, he knows that what happened to Jimmy was wrong, no matter how rational his lifestyle made it. And Russell is still unable to accept the moral implications of Jimmy's murder, instead telling Frank that he went along with it to protect the two of them, which is probably true, partly, so it's quite a good deflection tool. But my favorite part of that absolutely haunting conversation comes at the very end.
Mangi che cresci, pigliami male.
Eat so you'll grow up. Eat, my son. Absolutely beautiful writing. It goes to show how much Russell cared for Frank, but he also says it to get his mind off of what happened to Jimmy. Russell's final words also speak to what he's fixated on during his time in prison. Frank sees him getting wheeled through the courtyard, and Russ tells him, "I'm going to church. Don't laugh, you'll see." He wanted forgiveness in the end. Even though he was one of the better gangsters in that world, Russell realized that some of the decisions he made to preserve that lifestyle, they just weren't worth it. And once Frank leaves prison, he comes to the exact same conclusion, just like Russell said he would. Amazing relationship those two had. I think the moral of Russell's story is this. All of the things that Russell tried incredibly hard to preserve in his life were transient. He wanted to preserve his power. He wanted to make money. He wanted to be the best boss he could be, and he was one of the best. But Russell isn't leaving any children behind, and he did not lead a moral life. His legacy will be one of a criminal, and his turn to the eternal in the final moments of his life tells me that Russell recognizes this. Intelligent, disciplined, feared, loyal, an essay could be written about all the different traits we see in Joe Pesci's performance as Russell Bufalino. If we never see Pesci again on screen, it was one hell of a send-off. It is staggering that the same man who played Tommy DeVito in Goodfellas could give what I think is an even better performance as Tommy DeVito's antithesis. He didn't get an Oscar for it, but I think as time goes by, Pesci's performance in The Irishman will be considered the true greatest performance of that year in film. If you enjoyed this character analysis of Russell Bufalino, subscribe on your way out. There will be more character analysis videos in the future, and also check out a couple I've already made. I'm biased, but I think they're pretty good. Anyways, thank you so much for stopping by. Have a fantastic rest of your day. I will talk to you soon.